And if Darren Peterson is fully healthy, I truly believe this will be one of the most underseeded teams in the tournament in terms of whatever seed they're at. They're far better than that, if healthy.
I love watching him play basketball. I want to see it as much as possible at the college level. But if you don't have real time together on the court for extended periods, then I do think that is a major issue for Kansas that will prevent it from making the Final Four.
Hey everybody, welcome to the EvanMiya College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Evan Miyakawa, and we've got a lot to get into this week. Kansas beats BYU, but the Darren Peterson injury saga continues. Illinois got a big road win for the second weekend in a row. Michigan made a statement Friday night over Michigan State. In the SEC, Florida and Kentucky both got some big wins this weekend. And perhaps most notably, Arizona is still undefeated. So I'm very excited to get into all of it. Matt Norlander is here on deck with me in a second to talk about it. And later on in the show, we've got Fran Fraschilla joining us, so you won't want to miss that. Also in this week's Analytics Corner, I'm going to talk about some notable resumes, highlight a few most improved players in the country, and talk about teams with multiple star players that we want to keep an eye on. So we've got a great show lined up for you. But first, we got to get into the big storylines from this week, and here with me to do that is the great Matt Norlander from CBS. Norlander, we will get to the Kansas and Darren Peterson saga and all that in a second, but I actually want to start in the Big Ten with two statement road wins this weekend by Illinois and Michigan. Illinois goes into Nebraska and wins 78-69. Michigan goes on the road against Michigan State and wins by 12. I think both of these games coming in were kind of pick'ems. They could have gone either direction. But so on Friday night, Michigan started out strong, withstood a Spartan comeback to end up winning at the end. And on Sunday, Nebraska actually had the lead and a lot of momentum against Illinois until the Fighting Illini really asserted themselves late to take over that game. We're going to talk about both games, but which result and performance was more notable to you?
The Illinois result was more notable to me, although they're very close. And as we record here on a Monday, it's great to be on the show. It's great to follow Stephen Hartzell. He got on the show before me. Totally understand. If you haven't gone back and listened to the Hartzell interview on this great podcast, please go do so. I do a show on college sports now with Stephen Hartzell during the back half of the college basketball season. That's in addition to Eye on College Basketball. So I was all too happy to cede him some opportunities before I made my not-so-grand debut. To your question, Illinois doing that, and I shared this fact on another podcast, 2 road wins, top 5 teams within an 8-day span. Illinois just did it. Only the 4th team instance ever for that to happen, which is way lower than I would have ever guessed. Credit to our CBS Sports Research Department that brought that stat to me. And in fact, I got another one for you right now. Let me just dig this up here because it got sent to me this morning. If Illinois, so Illinois plays number 10 Michigan State on Saturday. The AP Top 25 has been released for this week since we started recording. If Illinois wins against Michigan State, it will become the first team in the AP poll era to ever win 3 road games against top 10 opponents in a 14-day span. That's what we're looking at with Illinois. Incredible if they can do it. They got to do it. We'll see if they can do it. Illinois didn't have Kylan Boswell. Didn't matter. Nebraska wasn't at full strength. The players were on the floor that were on the floor. They got the win. Illinois continues to rise. And I feel like the win put them a bit more in the thick of the conversation for national title contenders. Honestly, I've had Illinois there for about 2 weeks, and certainly when the Purdue win happened last weekend, Evan, that's when I thought with clarity they arrived in that conversation. Plenty to get to about the Michigan win as well, also done on the road. But for me, after what Nebraska had done to nearly beat Michigan, had the game on its home floor, Illinois walked right into Pinnacle Bank. That's what they did. In fact, there was an image that has since been shared widely in Big Ten circles where they had something written on the whiteboard in the Illinois locker room. Rob the effing bank. Well, they did it. 78-69. Keaton Wagler, outstanding again. He is rising to potential first-team All-American status. It's amazing to see what he's doing. And I get a big joy out of seeing teams that can play just outstanding offense and do it in a variety of ways. And to me, when you actually watch Illinois play, there's a lot of that. Like, they can hit some threes. They're not an amazing three-point shooting team. They can get into the lane. They can shoot from the mid-range. They're reliable from the foul line. They've got big bodies, obviously, and then Wagler's the centerpiece of it all. When Boswell returns, he's going to be a really, really good two-way player again. So Illinois has a lot of rightful buzz behind it, a lot of momentum behind it. And to me, it was the second most – this wasn't your direct question, Evan, but – it was the second most notable win of the weekend to me. What Florida did to Alabama was outrageous, and I thought that was one of the best 40-minute performances by any team in the past 3 or 4 weeks in the sport. But to your specific question between those two, I lean slightly toward the Illini.
I think the fun thing about seemingly every Illinois team each year is that they have just a bunch of really good players, and you don't really know exactly who's going to emerge. Well, this season, it's more unexpected than ever with Keaton Wagler. He just continues to be extremely excellent and make almost no mistakes in almost every game. He had 28 points in this game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, just 2 turnovers. What really sticks out to me is in this performance on the road against a really tough Nebraska team, and then you go back to a week ago and their win against Purdue, it's his free throw shooting reliability. He was 10 for 12 from the line in this game and 11 of 13 against Purdue. So, like, he is being put in these pressure positions, as one of the youngest players on the team, and he's just delivering. And then you look at the other guys on this team. I love the way that this team is like morphed around him, especially in the absence of Kylan Boswell, where you have these role players like Jake Davis had 13 points, Thomas Slavovic had 12, Mirkovic had 10. Against Illinois, it was like all of the other guys making threes. Keaton Wagler had 9 threes in that game. That was obviously like a crazy. But there were 4 other players on Illinois who had 2 threes in that game as well. So they're all able to pitch in when they need to. But Wagler, I mean, he's really the story here. I have him up to 3rd right now in overall offensive value among all players in the sport, behind Cameron Boozer and Braden Smith, according to BPR. And I'm really curious, like, what do you think is going to happen when Kylan Boswell comes back? Because obviously on paper, you want your full strength team, and Boswell does a lot of great things for this team that they are missing, but they're also having so much success putting the ball in Keaton Wagler's hands and having him play 35 minutes a game. So what do you think that dynamic is going to look like when they're hopefully fully healthy come March?
This is a real question. Now, it depends on the locker room, coach, players involved. I honestly think a lot of times teams can handle it just fine. And Boswell is a vet, and his defense is very key. Illinois is a good defensive team. It is not a great defensive team. I actually wonder if it gets caught in that kind of game where suddenly it's mid 60s with 2.5 to go. How does it respond in that kind of spot there? So you're going to have this dynamic where you've got this freshman wunderkid who really might be a first-team All-American after not being a top 150 prospect coming into the year, and then Boswell, who's been around the block, very tough, good perimeter defender, just a smart guy on that end of the floor, and is also capable of helping distribute and set up your offense in major ways. We'll see. I think they get back to a lot of what they were without him. I mean, with him on the floor. The loss is 4 points to Alabama, 13 to UConn at the Garden the day after Thanksgiving. And then against Nebraska, they lost at the buzzer at home, and a really just an entertaining game, an awesome game there. So maybe it takes a game or two to maybe get back in the flow, but if Wagler continues to be like this, like, you have to play around him. He's just been too good. That's a good problem for Brad Underwood and the staff to have. We wait and see on that. Also, Illinois is going to take it's 10-1 in the league. It's going to take a second loss at some point here. It might be this weekend at Michigan State. They've still got they got the LA trip. Can they get out of there without a scratch? They've got to host Michigan. Right now, they're pacing to be 17-3 in the league, according to Ken Palm. I presume I can invoke Ken Palm on this podcast. I think that sounds about right to me. 10-1, finish 17-3. And, oh, by the way, if that's the case, that means Illinois is 26-5 going into the Big Ten tournament. This is such a competitive group of teams vying for a 1 seed. Illinois could be like top 4 in the metrics, 26-5, and maybe not have a chance at a 1 seed going into the league tournament, despite that record, because of the teams that are surrounding it. We got to wait and see on how that all unfolds there. But regardless of that, I still consider them to be a viable national title contender, and of course, with that, our very real Final Four threat.
I do want to touch on the other team at the top of the Big Ten in Michigan, who withstood two big tests this week. I think the narrative around them coming into this last week was like, is Michigan really as good as all the metrics say? They seem a little bit shaky. If you throw out that Gonzaga 40-point win, how good of a team are they? Well, they withstood Nebraska, albeit Nebraska not at full strength. And then they go on the road and have a very, very convincing win, in my opinion, against Michigan State in a game that's going to be as hostile a road environment as you're going to find in the country. And they were up early. They withstood a run. They end up closing it out. Yaxel Lendeborg has been kind of the linchpin for when they've been really great or just okay. And he really returned in a big game to his best form. He had 26 points, 13 of 15 from the line, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks. I still have him as the second best player in the country in terms of his value behind Cameron Boozer. I know that he's not necessarily considered to be second for National Player of the Year, nor do I think he should, because Michigan has so many, players, but in terms of the value he's bringing on the court and what he's predicted to do going forward, I still think he's really strong. But Elliot Cadeau also has been huge for this team. It's the 3-point improvement from Elliot Cadeau that it's been remarkable for this Michigan team. He made 3 threes in this game. He leads Michigan in 3-point shots this year. He's made 37 of them. He's shooting 43%. That's more than any other Michigan player. I think if you asked any North Carolina fan last year, there's no way they would have predicted that to happen. But it's really the defense as well. I mean, Michigan State, I think, only had 5 points through the first 8 minutes of this game.
Yeah.
And that was in stark contrast to Nebraska, I think, probably had 22 points within 8 minutes when they played Michigan back on, I think that was Tuesday. And I think Jeremy Fears was great. We can touch on him, but Michigan, I think, has really quieted a lot of the doubters. I certainly think there are people lurking in the shadows saying they're not buying this Michigan team, but for the time being, they've proved them wrong.
What does that even mean for anyone that was out there expressing that opinion on social media or in podcast form? Team is 20-1. It's now back at number 1 in a variety of predictive metrics. I'm interested though. Did you dive into is there correlation? Michigan's best wins in Yaxel's performances and its closest
That's
wins?
something I've noticed anecdotally. I've not specifically studied that, but it seems like when they've played the best opponents on their schedule, for the most part, he's been excellent. And so, that's been something I've been watching.
Yeah, Michigan's got a variety of ways to beat you. Lenneborg's the best player. Cadeau has come on really strong. Merez Johnson, if you watch the Big Ten, you know how good he is, and the staff obviously values him tremendously. He is the glue guy, if you will. Adai Mara has taken the jump I thought he would. Namari Burnett's just a quiet senior leader that can maybe he's really more the glue guy than anyone there. Wasn't a huge factor at all in the game in East Lansing over the weekend, but with those, and then they've got 9 reliable guys. So if Michigan doesn't win the national title, doesn't mean they were overrated. They're pacing toward a 1 seed. That was a really nice win. And actually, as we talk here on a Monday afternoon, Dusty May had his media availability earlier in the day, and he has no issue just fanning the flames of that rivalry, essentially calling out Michigan State for dirty play. There is a video that has been shared a bit of Jeremy Fears dipping his foot in and basically trying to take out a Michigan player. And Dusty May said, go watch the tape. It's all over it for 40 minutes. So there's that. Listen, there's no love lost in this rivalry. Credit Dusty May for walking right into that job and leaning right into it. He, of course, had the picture beforehand, which has been shared widely as well. But Michigan is as good as any team in the country, not named Arizona. Arizona fans want to continue just to harp on anyone that doesn't put them clearly above all the others. 22-0. I get it. Until you lose, I'll put you there. You're a high major team. You've played incredible non-conference schedule. You're in the Big 12. You've yet to lose. Got some beast games coming later this month for sure. But that was mighty impressive by Michigan. And then I don't Michigan State, 19-3. It's done really well for itself. It was number 1 in defensive efficiency going into the game. Now it's number 2. It's just a matter of, okay, Fears has been outstanding. I think Fears has a case to be a first teamer. He's definitely second team at worst. He's been right there with Braden Smith in assists per game. But can they get enough around him? Jackson Kohler has been productive. Cohen Carr is the best in-game dunkers in Zion. Carson Cooper is a reliable big. I like the way that he plays, but they can't have these games where it's like, okay, it can be Fears and one other guy. When you play legit teams, it's got to be more than that. So we wait and see on where that goes with them. I still buy them as a national title contender. Yes, I mean that, national title contender. But it was a missed opportunity, and they just got down too big. Now, they overcame the deficit. I get that, but sometimes you just exert so much trying to get back into the game, can't hold on to the rope, and there it is.
I want to touch on some other stuff here, but I will say really quickly on Jeremy Fears. I love what he's doing for this team. I have him as the second most indispensable player in the country to any team behind Cameron Boozer. So when we're talking about how important a player is to their team's success and how much the drop-off is without him, he rates as the second most important guy in the country. I think that tracks. I also think he's the best playmaker in the country. I think he's been even better than Braden Smith, and that's saying a lot, given that Braden Smith is going to potentially break all-time records and stuff, but that's how good Jeremy Fears has been. So I'm not out on this team. I think they're playing arguably the best team in the country. So I still think this team is capable of a lot, and they've really overachieved relative to expectation this year. And so, regardless of where they end up, it's been a really fun year. I do want to touch on the Kansas Darryn Peterson stuff. We're taping this on a Monday, so we don't know yet what's going to happen in tonight's game for Kansas. But really, I want to focus on Kansas wins this game 90-82. They had a tremendous first half. I was looking at the box score, and if you look at the box score without having watched the game, it's very misleading because all 5 Kansas players are in double digits. Everybody's between 12 and 21. It looks like it was just a very, spread out performance. And that's not really what happened. It was the Darren Peterson show in the first half where he looked like by far the best player in college basketball, number 1 pick, all that stuff. He rates as the best pure scorer in college basketball, according to my metrics. The analogy that I was thinking about this weekend in describing Darren Peterson, of seeing how good he was on the court and then his, apathetic body language on the bench when he stopped playing in the second half, was I kind of thought of it was like if you're playing in an adult rec league playing basketball and you really need to make the playoffs and you phone a guy who played former D1 or G League or something, and you're like, hey, would you mind playing with my team for a night? And then he comes and plays really good and then decides I don't want to break too much of a sweat. That's sort of what it seems like with Darren Peterson. My question for you is, we've seen how elite this Kansas team can be. And if Darren Peterson is fully healthy, I truly believe this will be one of the most underseeded teams in the tournament in terms of whatever seed they're at. They're far better than that if healthy. But obviously the swing without him, at least in terms of just the dynamics around this team and what they're capable of, massively change if there's any level of doubt, even going into the tournament, of whether he's going to be able to play full games. Do you think this is going to end up having an impact on Kansas when we get to March?
I thought about this in the past couple of days. Again, we are recording this before the Kansas game at Texas Tech on Monday night, and I know your listeners are going to get this on Tuesday. So who's to say what's going to happen in that game? Is Peterson going to play 33 minutes and look incredible? Is he going to be on a minutes restriction? Will he be sat for some of the first half so we can play more in the second half? I have no idea, right? So not knowing what's going to happen here versus when your listeners are actually taking the podcast, I have wondered, when we get to March and the stakes are the highest, it's clear cut. And I'm not even necessarily just talking the NCAA tournament, although that's the most important. What if Kansas is in a position here where it's, dancing on the line? I don't think it'll get to a 1 seed, but dancing between a 2 or 3 or 3 or 4. And it's got a particular game with real urgency that has a lot of leverage to it. How much will we see in Peterson in those moments? If the game over the weekend was an NCAA tournament game, would Darren Peterson have been on the floor for the second half? I don't know. They were up big. They were at home. They were able to hold on despite Richie Saunders also suddenly looking like a first-round NBA lottery pick. The more, I'll say this, again, not knowing what happened Monday night, the more that this continues, the more liable and vulnerable Kansas will be to falling short of any kind of expectation. Because this has been, in my estimation, without debate, one of the 5 biggest stories in the sport this season. You can probably make the case it's a top 3 story in college basketball in a season loaded with so many plot points. And we're about to have the Super Bowl. The NBA is going to have the All-Star game. I get all that. And the Olympics, Winter Olympics, I love them. I'll be writing about them a little bit for .com as well. They'll take some attention. But college basketball is really about to have its annual turn into the bigger spotlight by mid-February, and then March is just another level, and then the tournament jumps up 5 more levels after that. This story will only increase the noise around the team as the season goes on, and in particular when it comes to gameplay, because Bill Self has admitted this, like when it comes to playing with each other over the course of a full game, like Peterson is just outstanding. I love watching him play basketball. I want to see it as much as possible at the college level. But if you don't have like real time together on the court for extended periods, then I do think that is a major issue for Kansas that will prevent it from making a Final Four. Hopefully this doesn't wind up being the case, Evan. Hopefully in the weeks to come, Peterson, there's no lingering issues with any body parts, and he can just go out there and play. And even if he is on a publicly stated or an unspoken agreement of being on some sort of minutes restriction, if he can get out there for 30 minutes or 28 minutes per night on average, and that can be deployed across first and second half play, because right now it's so tilted in favor of the first half, Kansas can be a real threat to go deep. They don't want it to be a what if situation. They kind of had this with Embiid more than a decade ago. Different kind of injury, different kind of player, of course, but we'll see if they can maximize it. I remain riveted by this storyline. I've never seen something like it before. Hopefully DP can stay on the floor and continue to wow, and maybe if he can in the process push himself to be an All-American, because right now he just hasn't played enough games. Like if I had to do a ballot today, he wouldn't be an All-American for me. He has not played enough to justify it. The NBA actually has this rule now where you got to play, I think, 64 out of 82 games, something like that. Peterson has played in 10 and a half out of Kansas's 21 games. He needs to log more time on the floor before, at least from my end, he can get real consideration for All-America status.
Yeah, I think if we had even 4 or 5 games where he was totally healthy going into the tournament, the level of intrigue around this Kansas team of what can they do in the tournament, I think would be amazing for the sport. So I'm really hoping that he's fully healthy. Speaking of the Big 12, I want to touch on this a little bit before we get to a fun game here. I put up an article that you can read on my blog on Friday that came up with a new metric for ranking or rating how good all of the conferences are. There's been a lot of discussion this year about how the SEC is down in terms of their elite teams, in terms of their potential to win a national title, make Final Fours, all that stuff. And yet, according to the metrics, Ken Palm, the Net, My Side, etc., the SEC is still ranked as the best conference. We've talked about it. It's because the middle and bottom of the conference is still really strong. But I think when we talk about which conference is actually going to move the needle the most in March, whether that's having the best chance of winning a title, making Final Fours, getting teams in the tournament, it's been the Big 10 and the Big 12 that have been, the clear-cut top of the sport, and the SEC in third. So I created a new metric that more heavily weights the teams at the top of each conference, that basically is more of a proxy for which conferences are going to matter the most in March. And when you look at this new metric, again, this is not evenly weighting all teams. It's more putting emphasis on the top and less on the bottom teams. The Big 10 and Big 12 are neck and neck. And actually, when I published the article, the Big 10 was slightly ranked higher, but it's actually flipped now, where the Big 12 is the best conference. Do you agree with the fact that those two conferences should be above the SEC in terms of just what we're talking about on a daily basis, and how strong we think the conferences are in terms of what people really care about? And which of those two would you say has the edge over the other?
Yeah, I would. I have one quick question, though, on your process. Do you at least allot for, like, extraordinarily bad teams to bring the league down a little bit if that's the case? Because I would do that. Like, to me, it's got to be a balance of every team has to matter, obviously, in the ranking. But if you have 5 teams in the top 20 of your metric, and then you've also got 2 teams near the bottom that are like, 110 and 123 overall. Like, those aren't good teams. Good teams are not great teams at all, but they're not historically bad. But if you had a team in your league, or 2 teams that were like sub 150, I do think that should bring you back down a little bit to earth. Like, I don't want to discard the bad teams because they're in the league. You got to have them mean something. So do you at least have some counterbalance for that?
Yeah, so every team still matters, but the amount of weight on each team is not even. It's more towards the top and less towards the bottom. And I honestly think this is all a little bit like there's not an exact science to this necessarily, but I think part of it is the Big 12 and the ACC, for example, could argue that it's not their fault that you shouldn't peg the conference for adding a team like a Utah or like one of the bad teams from the ACC, that they should then pull the conference down because you've added a team. Like there's some of that discussion going along in recent years because of all the realignment stuff. Should you penalize a conference for adding another member that ends up being really bad and dragging down the conference? I think at the end of the day, it's important to have both. It's important to have a metric that measures just like how from top to bottom, how difficult would it be to play against every team in that conference. And I still have that, and the SEC still ranks as number one there. But then another way of looking at it is saying which conference is going to actually is more top heavy and going to matter the most in March. And when you put it that way, right now, the Big 12, I mean, they have 3 of the top 7 teams at EvanMiya.com, 6 of the top 17. Half the conference will be in the tournament or close to that. The Big 10 is very close in that regard as well. So I think it's deserved that those 2 conferences would be ahead of the SEC there.
Yeah, I like the ambition from you here, and I agree with this. The SEC does rank as the number 1 league in basically every advanced metric from top to bottom, kind of evaluating with even weight on all of them. But I don't think you'll find many people this season saying the SEC is the best league, unless they're broadcasting games specifically for that league on television. It's just not going to happen. The Big 10 and Big 12 are the 2 best leagues. Big 12 for me is the best league in the country because you've got Zona, Iowa State, Houston, Tech, Kansas. Throw BYU in there because it's still dangerous. 6 teams for sure. Final 4 capable. That's a healthy crop of teams. There could be a gap. There could be a tier. I get all that, but those are the teams that really matter. UCF has done a nice job this season, of course, as well. And we'll see if anyone else can break through. Maybe, maybe not. Big 10, I think, has the widest middle. So you've got Michigan, Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue. Keep Nebraska in that conversation. Final 4 capable teams, and then you get into the likes of Iowa, Indiana, maybe USC, UCLA.
I still really like Ohio State.
The Big 10 has
really like Ohio State.
This is why I would put the Big 12 over the Big 10 because the Big 10 has Maryland bad, Oregon awful, Rutgers terrible, Northwestern sub 500, Minnesota's not been able to have any kind of success despite having some real threats on some teams. Penn State's not good. It's got like a bottom third that's just woof. And so for me, that's why Big 12 would be number 1. It's got the best combination of title contenders, Final 4 contenders, and teams at the bottom. Utah's not good, but I think the bottom 5-6 teams in the Big 12 collectively are better than the bottom 5-6 in the Big 10.
Yeah, and the Big 12 does edge out the Big 10 slightly in this metric, which you can find at evanmiya.com. Okay, I want to end with a fun game. I think we're a little more over a month from the bracket coming out when we will make all of our official picks, and there will be exact regions that teams can go through to get there. But I want to do a little bit of a trust exercise right now. I've picked about 15 notable teams. I've randomized the order here. You do not know the order. I've not really thought about this much either. Basically, what we're going to do is one at a time, I'm going to give you a team in rapid fire. I want each of us to pick, if you had to pick right now, how far do you think that team is going to advance in the NCAA tournament all the way up to the national championship game? We don't necessarily have to pick a title team in this exercise, but how far do you think they're going to advance? And we'll just do this rapid fire.
This is the Squidward meme, but not with seeding, but with results.
Correct. And this will look really wrong in 2 weeks, I'm sure.
Yes.
But this is going to be.
I am projecting and predicting the NCAA tournament fate of all of these teams.
Yes, that is correct. And I will do the same. Okay, we're going to start with Michigan State. How far do you think Michigan State is advancing in the tournament?
Elite 8.
I think I'm at Elite 8 as well. Purdue.
Final 4.
I don't think I can get there. I think I would have been there 2 weeks ago. I think I'm going to say Elite 8 for Purdue. Kansas.
Sweet 16.
Yeah, Sweet 16 for me as well. Florida.
Sweet 16.
Oh, man, I thought you were going to go higher there. I was also going to say Sweet 16. We're in lockstep. Okay, Nebraska.
Sweet 16.
I'm taking Elite 8 for Nebraska. I really
keep in mind as we do this, some of these teams will lose in the first weekend, which is what makes the tournament incredible. Without knowing the matchup, it's hard to say. So I'm prone to pick a sweet upset here and there. It's going to be hard for me to say a lot of these teams. I don't know where you're going. Maybe I'm going to get one before that where I can say with like real conviction and clarity that I can see them falling before the first weekend or the second weekend. When we get to the bracket, I'm going to have a different opinion.
Absolutely.
I just want to give a little more context as to why I'm answering how I'm
Absolutely. Okay, what about Gonzaga?
Elite 8.
I'm going to say Sweet 16. UConn.
Final Four.
I'm going Elite Eight. I'm not quite there with
Okay.
UConn. BYU.
Tell you what, this is the team. You want to talk about a team that could drop in the first game or make the Final Four? That's one. I will split the difference and say AJ DeBonsa experiences at least a Sweet 16. I'll say Sweet 16.
I'm also Sweet 16. Michigan.
Title game.
I'm going to say Final Four. I feel like this Michigan team, they're the number one team on my site, so I believe in them a lot. They feel a lot like Auburn last year to me, a team that was really good during the regular season, and they'll get to a Final Four at least. I don't know if I can put them further than that, just in terms of my gut feel right now. Okay, Illinois.
Elite Eight.
I think I'm going to say Final Four.
Okay.
Houston.
Title game winner.
Yeah, I'm putting them in my title game right now, I think. Okay, fun one. St. Louis.
Yeah. A Sweet 16 with definitiveness, and I am flirting with saying Elite Eight, but I will say Sweet 16.
Wow, I love that. I can only get to round of 32, but I would love to see more.
They're too good, man. They're too good right now. I'm Sweet 16. Let's go. They're gonna carry the torch, because Miami, Ohio is not making the Sweet 16. They are gonna carry the torch a year after there were no mids in the second weekend. They're doing it this year.
I think that's just a lot of pressure for them to be carrying into the tournament, but I hope you're right. Okay, let's do Kentucky.
Okay, here we go. I'll go second round on Kentucky. As I said over the weekend, whatever you do with this team in your bracket, you are going to be wrong. Just accept it, embrace it. If you say they're getting upset in the first round, that's not what's going to happen. If you write them into the Sweet 16, that's not what's going to happen. But I will say second round for the Kentucky Wildcats.
I currently predict them to win their first game by 3 points and then lose their second game by 20. So I'm say second round as well. Arizona.
Final Four.
I will say title game for Arizona. Okay, 2 more. Vanderbilt.
Sweet 16.
I think Sweet 16 as well. I was thinking about Elite Eight, but I don't know if I can get there. Last one, Duke.
Okay, I've given you Houston over Michigan and UConn and Purdue in the Final Four. I gotta go Elite Eight with Duke. I gotta be proper about this. So I will give you Elite Eight with Duke. Speaks to the depth of this year, though. And Purdue I had in the preseason Final Four. I'm just gonna stick with that. We'll see. I almost like the idea of a lot of people fading Purdue and then them exceeding those expectations when we get to March. I'll go Elite Eight Duke. I'm guessing you're gonna say Final Four Duke, though.
I do have Duke in the Final Four. I think they're, being slept on nationally. I think the fact that they're playing
no one is sleeping on Duke.
No. Not in terms of like
Duke can never be slept on nationally. It's 20-1. It's got the National Player of the Year front runner by far. It is not being slept on, Evan.
I think people are disregarding how good this Duke team is because it feels in some ways similar to last year, just not quite as good. But the reality is, I think this team is not quite as capable, but close to what Duke did last year. So I think that I've not seen enough love being given Duke's way for how good of a team I think they are.
You heard it here, folks. EvanMiya needs the media to talk and write more about Duke. They'll be thrilled to hear that down in the Triangle.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we will see how all that shakes out. But I think that was a fun exercise. So for the record, who did you have winning the national title?
I have Houston over Michigan in the title game.
Okay, I think I had Arizona and Houston in the title game. So I kind of feel Houston would win that game, to be honest. But we're going to get to see that matchup, much earlier than that. So that'll be fun. All right, I think that wraps up what we're going to do here. But thank you so much for coming on. You are one of my favorite analysts to listen to and read and all that stuff. And you're seemingly everywhere these days. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
I appreciate you, bud. And congrats on this new venture. Obviously, your site is a daily check-in for me, without a doubt. And I look forward to seeing you at the Final Four in your backyard. You know what this means? Hosting duties are now kind of on you. Like, I kind of assemble that, get in Thursday night, Wednesday night dinner with some folks. It is on you potentially to organize such an event. So I hate to break it to you, but there's another thing that's going to be on your table in late March here, bud.
Thank you to Matt Norlander. He does a great job writing for CBS Sports.com. You can find his weekly court report that comes out on Wednesdays, among other things. And then, of course, the Eye on College Basketball podcast that he does with Gary Parrish. Always a must listen for me every single episode, so be sure to go check that out. Well, we've got more games and big storylines to get to, and with me to do that is a very special guest, Fran Fraschilla from ESPN, who had a front seat to a lot of the action this week. Fran, I want to start by talking about Kentucky's big win over Arkansas on Saturday. You were in the building calling this game in Fayetteville.
Yes.
Final score, Kentucky 85, Arkansas 77. Now, this was a game to me that did not set up to finish this way at all. This was kind of polar opposite for me, the storylines and trends for both of these teams. So Arkansas has been notoriously excellent at home, undefeated this season in Bud Walton Arena. They've looked like a top 5, top 10 team in the country playing at home. And then on the flip side, Kentucky, I've been documenting this for a while. Kentucky has really struggled to keep their level of performance against the very elite teams on their schedule. They've mollywopped a lot of bad teams, and some of the middling teams in the SEC they've had success against, but really outside of a game or two, it's been pretty non-existent for them. So I don't think a lot of even Kentucky fans were necessarily expecting them to play well on the road. And then you talk about Darius Acuff, who's been unstoppable, but Kentucky had a very convincing win in this particular case. Otega Owe had a great game, kind of showing why people voted him as he's the SEC preseason player of the year. 24 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. He was 9 of 12 from the floor. And they also limited Arkansas from the 3-point line. I think Arkansas only had 3 threes in this game. They were just 3 of 14. And, this is actually kind of an interesting trend for Arkansas. They had 2 threes in their previous game, their win against Oklahoma. But before that, they had always hit 5 or more threes in every single game. So this is maybe a dip for them. So what were your overall takeaways from this game, both for Kentucky and for Arkansas?
See, Evan, you're the analytics guy, but I'm the psychology of coaching guy, okay?
Yes.
And we can talk about Texas Tech, UCF later, because that was set up for a home win for UCF. But I've always been a big believer in the psychology of the schedule. And you say, what does that mean? Well, a lot of times when let's take Kentucky, for example. They were on a 5-game win streak, right? They go to Vandy. Had they played really well at Vandy, they'd probably have cracked, top 15 maybe, 6 in a row, win at Vandy. Oh, they're going to Arkansas. They should be really on a roll. And it doesn't work that way with young people. When you're between 18 and 22, there's a lot going on in their head. And so my feeling was it was going to be a close game. And by the way, last year, Cal and his team go into Lexington 1-6 in the SEC, first game back, the hoopla, the craziness, and Arkansas comes away with a win. So this was a definite psychology to schedule game. For 72 hours, the Wildcats were told that they're not any good, and it's different than coaching at St. Louis U or Seton Hall. When you play at Kentucky, the entire Commonwealth is following everything you do as a player and coach. So I think the key when I was coaching in games like this was to get off to a quick start or don't get blown out early. And how poorly Kentucky's played in the first half of many, many games this year. It's almost mathematically, it just seems impossible to be trailing like in, 14 of 16 games against Power Conference, something crazy like that. So I wasn't really surprised because I felt like they had that going for them. Arkansas's at home, feeling good about themselves, 5-game winning streak, stealing a game at Norman where they could have easily lost. And but the key in those games for a team like Kentucky, given all the magnitude of that game, was stay in the game, TV timeout to TV timeout. And one of the things that I remember saying early second half, it's really funny because I have so much respect for what you do analytically. Whenever my team had a big lead at the half, especially when it was kind of unexpected, we used to literally practice first 4 minutes of a second half, because when you're up 7 or 8 at the half and you're on the road, the other coach is going crazy in that locker room, and you know that their team's going to come out firing on all cylinders. And the worst thing you could do after 20 great minutes is to give away a 7, 8, 9, 10-point lead like in the first 3 minutes. Well, Kentucky had a good start to the second half. Then they went through all the technical fouls where it was a parade to the free throw line. That was crazy. But they kept their composure. And down the stretch, they got more confident, and the Razorbacks got tighter. And that's why I say these are games that sometimes defy the analytics, and it's really the psychology of the schedule.
Yeah, and that technical foul situation, I mean, if there's anything that could have come out of the blue to derail a team, that was wild. I think in that 39-second sequence when Kentucky had 3 technical fouls, I think I tweeted something like they were on pace for 200 for the game or something. That was wild, but they were able to survive that. And I mean, this team is looking night and day different overall than where they were even 2 weeks ago. I think early January, Kentucky fans would have said, I do not care what seed we have. Just give me a ticket to the tournament. It can be Dayton. And now they're looking at, on my website, I have them as about a 6 seed in terms of their resume. They're a top 30 team in the country in terms of the predictive analytics. So they've really turned a corner. Now, are they reaching the levels that Kentucky fans and many national pundits thought? No. But this is a team that has shown like, hey, we're going to be solidly in the NCAA tournament if we continue on this track. You know, I think one thing that helps them a little bit is, you know, I've been talking about this. The SEC, yes, is maybe missing the number of elite teams at the top that we saw last year outside of maybe Florida. But the middle to bottom of this conference is still just as loaded as ever. And for that reason, every single win that Kentucky gets is very significant in terms of adding to their resume. And that's been super, super huge for them. And, you know, now looking at this point in the season, they've got several marquee wins. I think that several of their wins, like at
carry
Tennessee,
weight. They carry
versus
weight.
St. John's, they've really like looked a lot better in retrospect than they were maybe at the time. So,
I agree.
Yeah,
I would say this about that. First of all, I think the back end of their schedule is still reasonably difficult, but those are opportunity wins. Here's what I would say about Kentucky. They don't have a point guard. As good as Otega Owe is, the Malik Thomas, terrific freshman. No, those guys. No, Malik's on the other team. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind because I'm thinking of
Jasper Johnson.
Jasper Johnson, but Jasper's not playing that much. But Denzel Aberdeen is who I was thinking of. You know, I got them all mixed up because of Cal. It's Calipari's fault.
It's all the
but
same
no,
team.
they don't have a point guard. Even Denzel is not a pure point guard. He's a scoring guard. Otega always a wing playing point guard. And so that could be a problem, but they're galvanizing as a team, I think, because of all the pressure that comes with playing at Kentucky. So I agree with you. I don't know that they're a juggernaut by any stretch. They can beat any team in the SEC except for Florida. I studied Florida for about 2 weeks recently because we were supposed to go to Florida last week and do the Auburn game. And with all the weather issues, they kind of just sent us out to Provo. But Florida's playing outrageously good. That front line is just amazing. But to your point, good for Mark Pope and his team because there's so much pressure coaching there and playing there that they so far, again, psychology of the schedule, because now they got to take what they did at Arkansas and try to turn that into some currency here in the next 3-4 games. So we'll see, but certainly an impressive performance.
We'll talk about another impressive road win that we mentioned earlier. UCF goes, a home win. UCF wins against Texas Tech, 88-80, and this is UCF's second marquee home win against some of the big top dogs in the Big 12. They also have a road win at Texas A&M. I think that you can make an argument that UCF is the team that is, at least in the Big 12, most massively outperforming kind of the strength of their roster in terms of getting marquee wins, because in terms of the predictive analytics, like on my side, I have them ranked about 50th in the country. In a normal season, that would maybe leave you a little bit short of the tournament, but they have a top 20 resume in the sport. They don't really have any bad losses. I mentioned some of those wins. They have a knack for like coming up big, especially at home. And on the flip side of this, like Texas Tech, JT Toppin was great again. Yeah. Christian Anderson ended the game with 17 points and 9 assists, but I don't necessarily think you would say it was his best game. No. But I really think the pitfall for Texas Tech, and I want to get your opinion on this, of like, where does this cap their ceiling, is, again, the depth. If they don't have guys outside of Toppin and Anderson who are able to contribute, a Lawan Watts or someone like that, this was a game where they weren't able to get that production, and all of a sudden they're not able to play with the same amount of depth and production as the other team on the other end of the floor. We've seen many games this season where they've been able to overcome that, not a problem, but this was not one of those. So, impressive from UCF, and what are your takeaways for Texas Tech?
Well, this is a perfect example of what I say psychology to schedule. I'm going to tell you why. You beat a great team at home in Houston. You have a week off. Now, Grant McCaslin not doing this, but everybody in Lubbock is telling these kids when they're going to Brahms for a Sunday or, McDonald's, hey, you guys are great. You're great. You're great. They had the week off. Now they got to get on a plane. It's not a 45-minute trip to Fort Worth. It's a longer trip to Orlando. Now they're going to Orlando with the week off. Everybody telling them how good they are. They're playing a team that, to your point, is way better than I expected them to be. And I don't know where, you had them before the season, but a lot of people didn't really know how good Themis Folks was, who is playing great basketball. Riley Kugel's been at 4 schools. And the big guys inside, I think Jordan Burks is playing well, former Kentucky guy, Georgetown, now here. When I watched them on Saturday, what I took from it was a trap game. Like, when I coached, again, different than you studying those numbers, and I know you love watching the games too. When you play 35 games a year, there's always 5 games where you play over your head, okay? You're playing a November game against Bethune-Cookman if you're Texas Tech, and you make 19 threes, and you go, why couldn't we save this for Kansas? And you win by 45. But there's 5 games you play over your head. There's 5 games you play poorly over the course of the season. And there's 25 who your team really is, right? And Tech played one of its 5 games that they played poorly. And they looked like they were in quicksand. They absolutely did not look like the same Tech team. They got beaten on the boards badly. And the key to a great season is to win the games when you play poorly. On the other hand, UCF, to your point, already beat Kansas. They obviously are better than we all thought, and now they have an opportunity to add to their resume. And right now, I have to tell you, we have a top 6 heavy in the Big 12. They're not that far off, especially at home, from being in that mix with Tech and even a Kansas team that day-to-day we don't know if Darren Peterson is going to play or play a lot. So kudos to Johnny Dawkins because he has done a great job with that team. They have size, they have guard play, they have shooting, they play hard. And as you know, Evan, they're really tough at home.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the whole having 5 great games and 5 bad games. I think that range of outcomes for Texas Tech is wider than most teams in the country because, what they showed, for example, coming back from close to 20 points down against a Duke team when they had 3 guys available was absolute peak. That is an incredible performance. And then the swings the other direction. I just checked their consistency rank in terms of their game-to-game consistency on my site, and they're bottom 20. So they're one of the most volatile teams from game to game. A team that is not volatile, they're extremely consistent from game to game, is Arizona. I want to spend some time on Arizona because you have spent a lot of time. You've spent a lot of time studying this team. You were, saw their big win on the road against BYU last week. This weekend, again, they're still undefeated, folks. It's February, and this team is still undefeated. They win. They was tied at halftime against Arizona State, but they end up winning this game comfortably. Koa Pete had a big game, but really, it's the depth of this team. All 5 starters in double digits. You have Tobe Awaka coming off the bench and having 13 boards, and then of course their win last week, where you had Jaden Bradley and Braden Burries, who were close to scoring 30 points each and looked like the best backcourt tandem in the country, the most reliable backcourt tandem. You cannot be more impressed with this team, the consistent elite level that they have to game. How do they do it?
Oh, it's a great question. And I love watching them. They're my favorite team to watch in the country because they remind me of the old school teams that I kind of came up with. You got to have 2 big guys. You got to have a great point guard, it was not as much, layups, threes, and free throws as we have now, obviously, for good reason. Jaden Bradley reminds me of Chris Paul in the mid-range. When he gets to that right elbow, especially late in the shot clock, he's incredible, and he's like, I don't know what he shoots, but analytically, I mean anecdotally in my head, I'm thinking he's 75% from that pull up. But they got everything, and I don't know that when I say everything, I mean they're not the most talented team of the last 20 years. I'm thinking of Villanova with that great run, with all those pros, but they have. First of all, let's give Tommy Lloyd credit for his GM hat. I thought they were going to be devastated by the loss of Vasar to North Carolina. And in retrospect, no, it sounds crazy because Vasar's got a chance to be a first-round pick, but he'll play in the league. They're better with Krivas. And I'm sure analytically, I know I was looking at some CBB analytic numbers. They're like 20% better defensively when he's on the floor because he's a mountain man. And I don't know if your numbers show that, but he's a phenomenal fit with Pete and Awaka. I look at it as like having a great defensive line in football. It's hard to run the ball on them. Let's say it's hard to score inside on them. So they got that. Their freshmen are precocious. I love Braden Burries. First 5 games of the year, he averaged 7 points a game, and everybody was wondering, like, what's up with this guy? Karchenkov is he's the villain in the James Bond movies. Like, he is tough. He's robotic. He's a great defender. He knows how to play. Everything you have in their top 8, they have everything you need to be a national champion. And then my favorite player in college basketball right now, Evan, I think you know what I'm going to say. It's Jaden Bradley. He's so old school. I was texting with Jay Wright the other day, and I said, if you were coaching, Jaden Bradley would be a Villanova, Diacono, Brunson, Gillespie kind of kid. And Tommy Lloyd, and here's the other crazy thing. They're not a bad three-point shooting team. They're shooting in 36, 37% range. And some people ignorantly, if you don't mind me saying that, think they can't shoot the ball. The problem is they want to annihilate you inside. And in annihilating you inside with twos and free throws, if you get Burries an open shot, or even Bradley this year over 40%, Karchenkov, Del Orso's not playing great, but he could shoot it. They'll make threes, but that's not what they want to do first. So I love this team. They're going to get beat somewhere along the way. And getting back to my psychology to schedule theory, I hope they lose a game or 2 in February, because I'd hate to see them go into the postseason undefeated like that Kentucky team in 14 did, and then ended up losing in the semifinals.
Yeah, we'll touch on that. They have an absolutely brutal stretch, which we'll get to in a second here. The thing for me that sticks out about this team is, you sort of talked about this. I don't think they're necessarily elite at any one thing, like the best team in the country at this one category. I really do think their superpower is their consistency.
Yes.
I have them first in the entire country in game-to-game consistency, which is basically saying this team never plays absolutely amazing, never poorly. It's always consistently their level, and their level is excellent, excellent, excellent. And you've seen this in so many games and so many late game scenarios where they just never seem phased. They rarely give up scoring runs. They are just so composed. I mean, my takeaway from watching their game against BYU was watching Jaden Bradley and Braden Burries. I was like, I don't necessarily know if that's the backcourt that most people would pick as their favorite backcourt in the country. But when I think, who am I going to see in the Final Four? That is the backcourt that really typifies like Final Four guards of tough, aggressive, composed, never rattled, making all the right plays. And Burries, he was 13 of 14 at the free throw line in their win over BYU for a freshman.
In front of 20,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the coin, you have AJ DeBonta, who was just 6 for 24 from the field. So Burries, was the best performer on the court, arguably, in that game.
Yes.
So, and the thing too is Jaden Bradley has an argument to be a first team All-American, but there are probably 15 players you can make a strong case for being a first teamer this year. That's how good the field is. So they may not end the season with a first team All-American, and yet they definitely have an argument to be the overall the best team, the best squad, the most togetherness. It's so impressive.
Well, here, everything you said, I agree with. And it starts with Tommy Lloyd, because when you talk to him or you listen to him in the post game, he's even keeled. And he's even said, it's so funny, he's even said, we're going to lose a game. Like it's so a matter of fact, like we're not going to go undefeated. And so he's got his team, to your point, which is not easy to do. First of all, for 8 kids who were in many ways somewhat heavily recruited, even Jaden Bradley was a McDonald's All-American, started on a number 1 seed at Alabama when he was a freshman. And now he's had 3 years with Tommy. But you think of all those kids, they played at a high level. Karchenkov comes over from Germany where he played with Shabazz Napier and Nick Weiler-Babb, a really good college player. He's been around good players. But they're all even-keeled. And the ego level of each of those kids individually is low. The ego level of the team is high. But it's a humbleness, too, that Tommy Lloyd keeps everybody in check. So great coaching job. I think Freddie Hoiberg, maybe Bucky McMillan, obviously they're going to get a lot of votes for National Coach of the Year. But Tommy Lloyd probably won't get as many because his team is so good and consistent. But what a great coach. And the proof's in the pudding. I got to check this, but pretty soon, it might even be tonight or the next couple games, he's going to be the winningest coach in NCAA history in his first 5 years.
Wow.
I got to do some. I think Mark Few's up there, Roy Williams, but Tommy's a great basketball coach, and not because of the X and O's necessarily, although they're not bad. He just has a great way with putting together a team, and you got to give him credit for that.
So here's the 4-game stretch that Arizona has coming up later in February. They're playing Oklahoma State this weekend, but then you have this murderer's row of all top, basically the best teams in the Big 12. You've got at Kansas, which that might be, especially if Darren Peterson is healthy, that might be the game of the season. That will be unbelievable. So you're playing at Kansas, who I have ranked as the 13th best team in the country. Then you're playing at home against Texas Tech, at home against BYU, and then at Houston. And so my predicted record for them through those 4 games is to go at 2.7 wins out of 4. So there's a very small chance of them winning all those games. And like you said, maybe they shouldn't even win all those games. What do you think is gonna happen during that stretch for them?
Well, I just think it gets back to the psychology of the schedule. I mean, you know what? If your coach is telling you we'll probably lose somewhere, it allows them to lose somewhere without the pressure. I think I can remember back in 2014 that as the season went on, and this was true with St. Joe's years ago, my first year at ESPN, I covered the A-10. They got to stick me somewhere. And so I did the St. Joe's run, I think, to the Elite 8 where they they lost a game in the A-10 tournament. But anyway, go back to Kentucky in 14. There's a lot of pressure on a team that's undefeated. It hasn't been done since 76. So, could they win all 4? Could they go into the the Big 12 tournament undefeated? They absolutely can. But I know you're the expert here. The odds are, my friend Brent Musburger, who knows a lot about gambling, would probably say that's not going to happen. And
it can happen. Yeah. There's a 19% chance it'll happen, but you would bet against it, and it won't really matter. Like this team, they're gonna get a 1 seed unless things fall apart. Like it's not gonna matter, and in some ways, it's probably better for them if they have at least a 1 in the loss column going into the tournament because
I think so, Evan. Because I'm going to tell you, I love following your stuff because I love the analytics. I'll be honest. When I got to ESPN, I was the guy that brought Ken Palm to us. Nobody knew what Ken Palm was, and I've stumbled on Ken stuff accidentally, like 04, and all of a sudden everybody at ESPN now is into the analytics, which is great because it allows me as a coach, a former coach, it allows me to figure out what my eyes are telling me. Okay, like what you do is a lot of times matches what my eyes are telling me, but I know this about coaching. Losing a game is not a bad thing sometimes. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with Arizona. Because as you just pointed out, they could lose 2 of those games, maybe 3 of those games, and still be a 1 seed. So it's going to be really interesting. I love that team. I think to your point, it's my favorite team to watch. And I've got some guys on the team that I love watching play too. They're all, they're in their own way. They got 8 starters. I mean, Aristotle is going to be really good too. You don't hear about him as much. But Aristotle would start on 2/3 of the teams in the Big 12 at least. And they got 8 starters, which makes them so much fun.
I think big picture, it's the fact that we have a team that's the number 1 ranked team in the country that's undefeated going into February. First of all, that's that never happens. But then 2, I don't think a lot of people would even say that Arizona is by far the best team in the sport. There are other teams that people would say could give them a game, potentially even be favored. That's how strong the top of the sport is this year. And speaking of like the top of the sport, I do want to kind of to get your thoughts on some of the National Player of the Year conversation this year, because it's been a really interesting race. I think Braden Smith was probably the front runner going into the year. He was certainly the player I had the highest rated in the preseason. He's certainly still in the mix, but I think it's hard to argue that Cameron Boozer is the most deserving at this point of being National Player of the Year, at least in my opinion, both in terms of how good his team is, how he's performed. You know, he's averaging, here are the numbers here. He's averaging 23.5 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, almost 4 assists, a steal and a half per game, shooting 60% from the field, almost 40% from three. You know, I have him as the number one most valuable player in the country. I think he's been great, but it's certainly not a case closed like it felt like it was with Cooper Flagg last year. You've got AJ DeBonta in the mix. Braden Smith is still capable. You've got other players like Axel Lendeborg, and you know, maybe if Jaden Bradley continues to play well, he's in the mix. What are your overall impressions of just how competitive the top players in the sport have been this year, and who do you think is really in the mix to potentially win this thing?
Well, normally in a given year, the guy that plays at Duke and has a great year is the guy that's the front runner because it's Duke and it's that, you know, the exposure. But this is one of those years because of Peterson and DeBonta and all the talk for the first 3 months. You know, he's quietly dominated the sport. You know, like if I had a draft pick, a high draft pick, if I was an NBA team, I'd want the 3 pick. I want the 3rd pick this year because everybody's going to take either Peterson or DeBonta, 1 or 2. Now it's early, and teams. I talk to teams all the time. I know it's not quite that cut and dried, but Cam Boozer to me is going to average 20 and 10 as a rookie wherever he goes. He's just so consistent. People say, well, he can't jump over. You know, we used to say phone book, but there's no phone books anymore. You know, New York phone book was like that thick. But I would have to say right now, it's going to be hard to knock him out of the perch, and not because he plays at Duke, but because his consistency of excellence has almost been underrated or under the radar this year, which is crazy. Because his numbers, I've been told the numbers are right there with Cooper Flagg's. Maybe they're even better. You would know. But I you know, Lendeborg's been tremendous. That's a great team. You know, going back just quickly to Arizona, when you look at Arizona, let's go back to the first game of the year, because we didn't expect them to beat Florida, and they beat Florida, and they've had some wins like that. You know, going on the road, beating Alabama handily. But to your point, Lendeborg is to Michigan what Cam is to Duke. And maybe what I was going to say Chinyelu, but it's probably Thomas Houck at Florida, and he's not going to be National Player of the Year. But I'd have to say right now it's going to be Cam, and I, quite honestly, as good as it is at the top with those great All-Americans, I think he'll get it somewhat easily. I do, just because Duke and they're winning, they got 1 loss, and the consistency of Cam Boozer's been Cooper Flagg like. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, let me put some numbers to this because you're absolutely right about the consistency. First of all, big picture, my metric I have at evanmiya.com, Bayesian performance rating, basically measures everything about your performance to tell you how good of a player you are. Cam Boozer's BPR this year is 13.9. Cooper Flagg last year was just a plus 13, and that was the highest we'd almost ever seen. So Boozer, in terms of the numbers, is performing even better than Flagg last year. But the consistency, like you mentioned, here are his game logs. First of all, the fewest points he has scored in a game was 14 points in his 2nd game of the season. But if you look at his game log from the last 15 games, 24 points, 8 rebounds, 19 points, 10 rebounds, 32 points, 9. 30 and 14, 21 and 13, 18 and 7, 27 and 8, 17 and 5, 26. There is never a game where he's bad. And the only way that someone is losing this commanding of a position is if they just start playing horribly. We've never seen.
They get 5 points, 4 rebounds for the next month.
That's not happening. That's not happening. So I'm with you. He's been excellent. And I think, he wasn't as hyped as Cooper Flagg was coming into the year partly because of Darren Peterson and AJ DeBonta all being in that conversation. And 2, I think people saw how good Duke was last year. And then this year, the attitude is a bit oh, there goes Duke. They're doing that thing again.
Exactly.
I don't think
he's getting penalized for being a Duke.
Yes. And I don't think that he's getting enough recognition for the year that he's having. And I think once we get towards the end of ACC play, once we're talking about 1 seeds, once we get to the tournament, I think people are going to be like, look at the production of this guy. He is doing everything in maybe a way that you don't realize how many points and boards he's scoring, because he doesn't carry himself like a guy who wants to get all the numbers. He just does everything for this team. It's so impressive.
It's almost like if they get to the Elite Eight, where we really focus on those last 8 teams with the Final Four, the average fan is going to say, wow, I didn't know he was this good. Well,
Yeah.
you haven't been paying attention, because he's been this good all year. And the other thing about those numbers too is, remember, there's games where I'm trying to think of who's like this, and AJ's like this a little bit. Like I've watched AJ forever. I've watched Cam forever at USA Basketball. Like there's nights where they're playing Florida State and they're up 25 and he gets the 18-9. Like now I don't know, like you just shouted out all those numbers, but I know AJ at times when he was at USA Basketball, he's such a great teammate that if they're killing Finland by 40, he's getting 13, 8, and 5. But if it's the gold medal game for the under-19s, he's the MVP. And to a certain extent, those great players who are on great teams, they don't have to be great every night. So when they are consistently great, I think it says a lot about their character too, where I'm just going to kill people until Coach Shire tells me he's taking me out. And that's a mark of a good player who's consistently good every time.
Yeah. Well, I know we could talk all day about this, but I want to be respectful of your time. You've got another big game you're calling tonight. So
yep.
I just really thank you so much, Fran. You do so much great things for this sport. And, most people who are listening to this are seeing you on their television once or twice a week. So, you're not going anywhere, but I just really appreciate you coming on the show today.
No, it's a pleasure. And when I discovered EvanMiya.com, it made my day, because I love, trying to find all the, I love teaching the game. And if I could teach it a different way, like with numbers, which, as I said, when I was a young coach, we did analytics, but we did it by hand. We charted things that were important to us winning. We just didn't call them analytics back then. So now the job that you do, it helps all of us. It helps coaches, teams, and certainly on occasion broadcasters who are smart enough to figure it out. So thank you.
That really means a lot. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to Fran Fraschilla for joining me on the show today. You can find Fran on seemingly every big ESPN broadcast these days. I know that he's going to be calling a lot more of the massive Big 12 games that we talked about in the upcoming weeks. He will be on your televisions for those. And he was one of the earlier adopters of the kill shot when it comes to college basketball and that being mentioned on broadcast. So I really respect his work, and I'm very appreciative to Fran for joining me today. All right, it is now time for Analytics Corner. This is the part of the show where I pick out some more interesting stats and metrics that have caught my eye, often from EvanMiya.com, that we can talk about. And we'll start with looking at some of the most notable resumes in the country. So if you're unfamiliar, I have a metric at EvanMiya.com called résumé quality that measures how good every team's resume is in terms of their wins and losses and who they've beaten and where those games took place. It's very similar in the way it's constructed to wins above bubble, if you're familiar with that. But basically, I think it is the most fair way that we have of evaluating how good a team's resume is. Basically, the nutshell version of it is every single game that a team plays, we evaluate it based on who the opponent was, where the venue was, home, away, neutral, and basically in terms of how difficult would it be for another team, specifically a team that's about the level of an at-large team that's just getting in the field, how difficult would it be for that level of team to win that game according to the game probabilities that we have at EvanMiya.com. And basically it looks across your schedule and says, how many games would an average bubble team or an at-large team be expected to beat against your schedule, and then how many games did you actually win? And the difference there really illustrates what you've actually done relative to all these other teams in terms of the resume you've put together. And I actually separate this into win quality and loss quality, because this is a really nice way of gaining perspective on which teams have really good wins, which teams have fine losses. So an example of this, actually, as I'm looking at this, is Miami, Ohio has the 32nd best resume quality. They have the number 1 loss quality in the country because, they're still undefeated. And as of February 2nd, they only have the 96th best win quality in the sport, but it is very impressive that they've lost any games. So all in all, that shakes up to be the 32nd best resume and would be about an 8 seed there in terms of that metric. So if we look at the top of the sport, there are 4 teams that have separated themselves as of right now to be the 4-1 seeds, and it is Arizona, Michigan, Duke, and UConn. They're all pretty close there. Arizona is number 1. This is not very surprising. They obviously have the best loss quality in the country, tied with Miami, Ohio, because they haven't lost any games. But Michigan is right behind them, and Michigan actually has the best win quality of any team in the country. Michigan has some really nice wins. Their win at Michigan State from Friday was obviously the most notable. Beating Gonzaga on a neutral, beating Nebraska at home, they're all great. Michigan, though, has a lot of mid-tier wins that I think a lot of people will probably not give them enough credit for winning all those games. But games like at TCU, at Washington, versus Auburn, San Diego State at Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Villanova, all of those are worth +4 in the resume quality metric category. That's 12 wins of +4 or better. No other team is anywhere close to that. I think Arizona only has 9. So Arizona has some maybe more eye-popping top wins like at UConn, at BYU versus Florida. But Michigan overall has assembled a lot of really, really good wins that are not a guarantee for a lot of these teams. So that's been impressive. If we scroll down to looking at the teams that are right around the cut line, I just want to briefly touch on some of these teams. So right now, according to resume quality, based on who deserves to be in the field, there are 7 teams right now that I label as just in the field. And in order, those are from right on the cut line to more safely. And those would be Iowa State, Missouri, George Mason, UCLA, New Mexico, Georgia, St. Mary's. Those are the 7 teams that are just in the field. And then Indiana has moved into the 9 to 10 seed category. They ranked 38th overall in resume quality. Indiana was on the flip opposite side as of about, a week ago or so, where they were at I think a minus 0.7 in terms of resume quality. So they were like almost a full win off of the tournament picture. And now they're a plus 0.7. So almost a full win inside the tournament based on what they've done against their schedule. Obviously, a huge piece of that is getting wins at UCLA over the weekend and then at home to Purdue. Those are huge, huge wins for Indiana. So they're really trending in the right direction. I also want to just talk about the mid-major teams and where they stack up here. Gonzaga in a mid-major conference, but we know they're not a mid-major. They have the 10th best resume. But outside of that, St. Louis, who is 20-1 this year, they have the 26th best resume in the country. That's good for somewhere in the, I think, 6 to 7 seed range. Miami, Ohio, I mentioned them. They have the 32nd best resume. That'd be about an 8 seed. And then other teams that should be in the field according to what they deserve based on resume quality in the mid-major ranks. Utah State, ranked 36th. St. Mary's, 39. New Mexico, 41. George Mason, 43. All of those teams are kind of in the 11 to 12 seed range, 10, 11, 12 seed range right now. San Diego State is just outside the field. They're lurking. Some other possible mid-majors that could get there with an at-large berth: Santa Clara, Liberty, VCU, McNeese State, Tulsa, Belmont. Most of those teams won't get in as an at-large, but if they were to win a lot of games going forward and then somehow slipped in the conference tournament, they could be in the conversation. So keep an eye on that going forward there, but I thought that was worth noting. Another interesting thing I wanted to mention here is looking at teams that have multiple players inside the top 30 nationally at EvanMiya.com according to Bayesian performance rating. BPR basically measures on offense and defense how valuable a player is when they're on the court, taking into account their individual stats, their impact on team performance, and kind of predicting their productivity level going forward. It's what I believe to be the best metric in college basketball for just evaluating how good or valuable these players are. And so if we look at teams that have multiple players inside the top 30, I think this list is really interesting. First of all, there is only one team in the country right now that has 3 players inside the top 30, and that would be Iowa State, who I think, according to this, has an argument of having the best trio of players in college basketball. Joshua Jefferson at 5th overall, but then you also have Milan Momcilovic and Tamin Lipsey all in the top 30. So Iowa State there has an advantage right now that no other team does in terms of having 3 players of that caliber. But there are 7 other teams that also have 2 players in the top 30. Those teams would be BYU, Duke, Kansas, Michigan, North Carolina, Purdue, and Texas Tech. So for BYU, that would be AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders. For Duke, it's Cameron Boozer and Patrick Ngongba. I think that's actually the highest rated tandem in the country. Boozer's number 1. That's not a surprise. Patrick Ngongba ranked as the 6th best player right now, according to BPR nationally. Not a lot of people are really recognizing what he's doing, but he's been great for them, especially defensively. Kansas, the 2 for them is Flory Badunga and Darren Peterson. Michigan, it is Yaxel Lendeborg, and who's the other one here? Merez Johnson. Oh, yeah. That they're very close to Duke because Yaxel is 2nd in the country, Merez Johnson is 7th in the country. So that front court has been really, really good there. North Carolina might be the most surprising one on this list, but not really when you think about what they're doing, because Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar have been really, really good for them this year. They're a great 1-2 punch in the front court, so they have been fantastic. Purdue has Braden Smith and Oscar Clough as the 2nd player there. A lot of people would have thought coming into the season it would be Trey Kaufman-Renn or Fletcher Lawyer, but it is Oscar Clough. He's been really, really important for the Purdue team and should hopefully be a key for success as they hope to rebound and play better down the stretch in Big Ten play. And then finally, Texas Tech, no surprise here. It's Christian Anderson and JT Toppin in this tier. So interesting to note those teams there and some of the other teams that are notable that don't have 2 players in the top 30. Again, some of this will change by the time we get to Selection Sunday. And for a lot of those teams that just have 1 player, it's, well, they have 1 really good player, and that's super great. But those 8 teams have an advantage over everyone else right now in terms of having multiple players in the top 30. So found that to be very interesting. Lastly, I want to touch on 2 players in particular who I have just been really impressed with the way that they have improved this season, specifically in several key areas. I want to start with Elliot Cadeau. We mentioned him a little bit earlier in the show, but one of the big gripes with Elliot Cadeau coming from North Carolina was a lot of people were very skeptical about whether he was going to be able to improve in his 3-point shooting because he was mid to downright awful at UNC. In his freshman season at UNC, he shot 19% from 3. Last year, he shot 34% from 3, but I think the way that teams were guarding him defensively, they still weren't really giving him much respect out at the 3-point line. This year, Elliot Cadeau is shooting 42% from 3 on over 4 attempts per game. I mentioned this. He's the leading 3-point shooter in terms of makes on the team at Michigan. And when you look at overall his progression in terms of his 3-point shooting ability at EvanMiya.com, one of the things that you can do is for all of these skill areas like 3-point shooting, you can actually pull up a player's profile and look at a graph of how their skill grade in this has gone up or down over time, basically as I've projected what they're going to do in terms of their shooting percentage going forward. At the end of his season last year, his projected 3-point shooting percentage going forward was 33%. So basically that was saying, I'm predicting he's going to shoot 33% this year, which I think Michigan would have taken, because that means that if you're shooting at 33%, that's someone you have to at least give some respect to, from outside the arc. But shooting 42% this year, I do expect that to come down probably going forward. Right now, his projection is at 35%, but that is a marked improvement from what we saw from Cadeau at UNC, and has become a huge, huge part of why he has been a successful point guard for Michigan. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to his improvement from outside the arc, because that's been really key for them. The other player I wanted to highlight today was Ruben Chinyelu. Ruben Chinyelu, I think some people have been talking about recently as maybe the National Defensive Player of the Year, certainly best defender in the SEC. And I agree with the SEC part at least. He has the best defensive BPR of any player in the SEC, and he's one of the best in the country. And in particular, his rebounding has just skyrocketed. Last year as a sophomore, he was playing 19 minutes a game, and he was averaging 6.6 rebounds per game. This year, his minutes has gone up a little bit, 25 minutes per game from 19, but he is averaging 11 rebounds a game. That's almost double of what he averaged last year. He has been absolutely incredible. And if you look at where he ranks among rebounders in the country, according to their skill grade and projections at EvanMiya.com, He is the second best rebounder in the entire country, now behind only Tobe Awaka, Arizona, who has notably been a great rebounder for a very long time. But Chinyelu's improvement in both the offensive and defensive side, rebounding-wise, has just been extraordinary to watch. And so I've been very, very impressed to see him, and he has been an absolute key piece to why Florida has been so good, especially recently, but really just reaching the potential that this front court has had, because we knew coming into the season that this would arguably be the best front court in the country. And it was a bit shaky at first, but I think they've kind of established themselves as that now. And Chinyelu has been maybe the biggest reason why. He's been outstanding. There was a defensive sequence this last weekend where he guarded like 4 different players on a single possession and just completely shut the water off for everybody against Alabama. So he's just been very impressive. Wanted to give some love to him there. So that, yeah, I thought that was worth noting today. So we'll see how Cadeau and Chinyelu do going forward, but they have been extremely impressive to me. Well, that is a wrap for our show today. I really hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. As always, this is an ad-free show, so anything that you can do to help support the show by subscribing and liking on YouTube or rating it 5 stars and giving it reviews on Apple and Spotify really, really helps the show, and I really appreciate it. We also have a winner from our listener contest last week. The listener contest was having people submit what they thought would be the best starting 5 in all of college basketball if you combine all possible players, and we ran it through the lineup analysis tool at evanmiya.com to determine the winner. And our winner is K Ducey at Illinois Deuce on Twitter. And the winning lineup is Braden Smith, Keaton Wagler, Yaxel Lindeborg, Flory Badunga, and Cameron Boozer as your best starting 5. Thought that was a pretty good lineup. I think that was a great submission. It had the best score of best grade of any lineup submitted. But let us know in the comments if you agree with that or think that you could have come up with a better combination. But congrats to K Ducey. I will be sending you your free evanmiya.com merch item in the mail soon. And for the rest of you can find the merch link at evanmiya.com. But again, thank you guys so much for listening. This show has been so fun to do, and this truly means a lot to me. I will see all of you guys next time.